And it looks like we're ready to start here. So that's where I'm gonna head into. So thank you everyone for staying for the last session here. What did I name this slide deck? Yeah, turning ADHD into awesome, dynamic, highly dependable. I usually just say that second D, I think it doesn't stand for disorder. I think it stands for dynamic. I, of course, thought ADHD was a disorder when I was a kid as I was dealing with it, but I also didn't know about ADHD back then. So it wasn't that big a deal. Let's talk about, we've got these slides in here. You've probably seen these a couple times now since this is the last session. So I may go through them a little fast, but the link is here for the code of conduct if you're interested. Those are always wonderful. I love seeing them in the Microsoft side of events because I never saw those in the Oracle side. So I love that. Let's talk about who I am. My name is Kellyn Gorman. I am the subject matter expert for Oracle on Azure at Microsoft. Yes, they do exist. I'm in the cloud architecture and engineering team. We're a group of engineers that just come in when the GBBs and the CSAs can't solve problems. And because I work in Oracle on Azure, that happens quite often because it's just a weird place to be. I live in Portland, Oregon. And if you can see my picture, I'll also show you this. That's my view right now. I am on the Columbia River. We live in a floating home in Portland. So it's a lovely day in Portland. It kind of goes sunny and then gets kind of cloudy again, but it's been beautiful. It is beautiful here, but I've been a DBA for about 25 years now and also a DevOps engineer. I work in Oracle and SQL Server primarily. I was one of those that got my Oracle certification. They handed me a 7 terabyte SQL Server and said, have at it. So I have always done both. And then of course, from there, they said, well, it's a database. And I got, MySQL, DB2, Sybase, Postgres, you name it, they threw it at me. And I've had so much fun doing it. But I'm also a DevOps engineer and I've taught a lot in the STEM arena. Oracle Education Foundation back in 2015 and 2016, they were opening up their DTech University on campus and they needed somebody to teach. They wanted Java and I said, no way, not a good language for kids. And so ended up writing the curriculum for Python for on Raspberry Pis for their Oracle Education Foundation and taught their first classes there. And I blog a lot on dbakevlar.com, not as much as I used to. I also blog on the Microsoft Data Architecture blog, which is the reason I don't blog as much as I used to. And I can be found on Twitter at dbakevlar, and I'm quite noisy and always have been. I was kind of an odd child. There's no question about it. I was not what people expected for a traditional girl. I was constantly moving and jumping and never staying still, climbing on things. I learned very, very quickly. I was 2 years younger than everybody in my classes. But if you asked me questions, in class, put me on the spot, I just kind of froze and couldn't answer anybody. I didn't feel like I had access to my brain. I had a lot of lack of impulse control. I didn't get along real well with my peers. I seemed emotionally much younger. But hey, I still act like I'm 6, so I'm kind of still there. I was definitely on the spectrum. If you'd known me as a child, I had trouble looking people in the eye. Like I said, had trouble interacting, understanding, communication with my peers. And I was happiest alone. I was quite content to go sit out on the swing set while everybody else was in having lunch. I just found my own company much more enjoyable. At the same time, I was taking, kind of inside rooms during breaks and had people have me recite stories from beginning to end. They thought it was interesting how my memory and my brain worked. So what's it like growing up with ADHD? Well, when I didn't know it was ADHD, nobody told me about it. I wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult, but I did hear a lot of these same things you're reading here. I was told I wasn't living up to my potential, was usually the common one. My younger sister, Christy, who was, the long blonde curls and the blue eyes and the skirt, and she looked prim and proper and sat still. She was going to grow up and be a secretary, and I was going to be the president of the United States. She grew up and was an administrative assistant, and I just didn't live up to my potential. But when you start hearing about these things, you're lazy. You just need to pull yourself together. You need to get going. Why aren't you finishing your tasks? Why aren't you doing what you need to be doing? You start to feel very demoralized, and that's one of the things that I hear from most people that deal with ADHD. I do a lot of mentoring in the community, and many folks that have ADHD, because I am very open and own it, are quick to come to me and ask for guidance as well as mentoring around it. And I see ADHD as a mindset. And I won't lie to you, this is what my brain is like as an adult. I'm not lying in any way. Somebody once described my brain as like 25 McDonald's drive-throughs all open and taking orders at the same time. And somehow I managed to get them right. But I have just all these channels open. I am what's called a hyper-aware, hyper-focused ADHD. It is part of that being on the spectrum. I'm taking in information from all directions at all times. I'm not very comfortable in big crowds, and it's not because I don't like people. It's because I'm just taking in so much information. It can be incredibly overwhelming. So what is ADHD as we focus in that one area and that type of mindset? ADHD, of course, has been around for quite some time. They called it a number of different things back in the 1800s, but it's not that it's that new. When we start talking about the most common doctors that specialize in this, they usually diagnose it and categorize it in about 3 to 7 areas. We hear that, you have inattentiveness and lack of control, hyperactivity. And we'll talk a little bit about hyperactivity because most people don't recognize all the different types of hyperactivity that can be demonstrated. Hyperfocus for some, which is the opposite of the inattentive. And people say they're so focused on that game, on that arcade game, not realizing that an ADHDer can absolutely be very focused on something. Lack of detail drives me crazy when I get 99.9% of something exactly right and miss this one little small piece of detail. If you've ever gone through that, you know my frustration. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Anxiety. Folks don't realize just how much this comes into play and why anxiety medications are sometimes prescribed to people with ADHD. It's because anxiety, and I've always said frustration can be my worst enemy. It will shut down your brain and can impact you as much as lack of attention. And then the emotional toll that it takes on us. So one of the big challenges is you talk to people and they say, were you ever formally diagnosed? I have been formally diagnosed, and the tests are kind of excruciating because it is seeing how low they can put your activity levels in your brain and see if they can trigger that ADHD kind of situation. But there's also significant stigma around ADHD. I was diagnosed after my first child was diagnosed. And I thought that ADHD was because you were a bad parent. Your child was diagnosed because you were a bad parent. I had to be retaught about this. I had to relearn about what it meant for an ADHD mindset, even though I myself experienced it. So you realize how much and how strong that stigma is that's out there. So when we get down to it, it has to do with low activity levels in some area of the brain that affects and it can be caused by stress, it can be caused by attention deficit, any of this. And it can impact you in ways that your neurotransmitters may not fire correctly. It impacts impulse control. It impacts hyperactivity. When those levels of activity go down, you don't have self-control. And this is where hyperactivity comes into. When somebody has lack of self-control, this is when they are jumping around or climbing on something or won't stop moving. It's a lack of self-control over that body part or over that body movement. It can also be with fast talking. We will talk about the speed of speech is a sign of hyperactivity. Fiddling with stuff. You have people that are hyperactivity that is just their foot shaking. Others will be moving something and touching stuff over and over again, almost like OCD, realizing that these are all signs of hyperactivity that people may not really take into consideration when they're thinking about what it is traditionally. It can impact your education, of course, because traditional education is all about memorization, can be very tedious. and is often not interactive, which is the way that most ADHDers need to learn. Our relationships, our career, and our overall quality of life. And we're going to talk about that a little bit too. But also talk about those less known symptoms. Obsessive itching, picking, scratching at yourself. If I have a hangnail, I will keep tearing at it until it's bleeding. This is part of hyperactivity. It's a loss of self-control. Keep that in mind. I mean, that's what it's all about, is a loss of self-control. I can have itchy ears, itchy scalp, and I have to scratch. I have to itch it. And it is part of, again, a sign of hyperactivity. It is part of my ADHD that people may not realize as such. Hoarding, being sloppy, messy. My daughter has it with executive dysfunction. I don't know how she can live with it personally, but you recognize it. It can become overwhelming. They have no idea where to even start, where to begin to clean. Obsessive behaviors, addictive behaviors when it comes to food, shopping, drugs, even sex. This is shown with impulsive behavior as well with ADHD. And then, as we talked about, hyperactivity already, and then working memory deficit. I like to say that I'll remember it at 3 a.m. in the morning. When I'm not focused on it, I don't become obsessed or frustrated that I can't remember a certain word, or I can't recall who that person was that was in that conversation with me. This has to do with your working memory, and it can suffer from low activity levels, just like anything else with ADHD. So the primary types of ADHD, like we said, it can be up to 7, because if you study like with Dr. Amen and things like that, he'll go up to types that get into the aggressive and violent that are comorbid versions of ADHD, where they get, violent. You have your pyrotechs and things like that go in and start starting fires. And those are those 6 and 7 levels, 4th levels. That's where your hyperactivity gets into aggressive behavior. But the top 3 that we see are inattentive presentation, which of course is commonly executive dysfunction, means it's hard to get started on things. You procrastinate. Inattention to detail. They have trouble paying attention, as well as unable to follow instructions or remembering conversations. That the way content and data and information is being received by the brain isn't real clear. They're having problems with that. Hyperactive impulsive presentation is the second type. They have a tendency to talk fast. You can tell pretty quickly. I fall into that category. They have a tendency to interrupt. Again, I'm in that category. I definitely am. I constantly am interrupting. I have to constantly pull myself back. Unable to sit still. You'll see me constantly shifting in my chair. It's just who I am. My youngest, they talk about how quickly he learned, but that he had a need to dance by his desk. Couldn't just sit in his chair even and shift. He had to dance by his desk. But if you let him do that, he learned great. So you notice that they're not able to sit still. They fidget. They were restless. They also have poor sleep patterns. They may be up in the middle of the night. I'm still one of those. I'm up at 5 a.m. in the morning. You'll see me tweeting at 3 a.m. The sleep patterns aren't as capable. We have racing thoughts as well. Our brain will wake up. It's hard to go back to sleep. It's not so much that you woke up, it's that you can't go back to sleep very quickly, because your brain wakes up and is going through all these cycles, and all those drive-throughs, as I talk about, are up and going and taking in orders. Impulsive, lack of control, as well as accident prone. My youngest used to, you could call him bonk and he would answer to you. So that's how often he was getting his head bumped into. So treating ADHD, I think this is very much a personal choice. But as we started going through this, I have the link to this data and statistics about ADHD from the CDC on this. This is the numbers on this, that we are looking at almost 10% of children in America that are diagnosed with ADHD. And these are diagnosed because I have sat in classrooms and can point out the ADHD kids from a mile away. I know the ones that are medicated and which ones aren't, the ones that have families that understand it and don't. It's very clear that the numbers globally aren't that different. They're 7.2%. You may say, well, that's still 2% different than the US. Keep in mind, a lot of these countries do not have the medical facilities to be able to address and diagnose this. So that's still pretty incredible at 7.2%. That some have medical treatment versus behavioral. I've always been told is it's best to treat it with your diet first. You'll hear, oh, getting no treatment is not a big deal. It's all on a spectrum. Even ADHD, you have some that do fine. My daughter didn't have any medication when she was younger. She got through school fine. My youngest, by the time he was 8, he was like, Mom, please get me something. I'm tired of getting in trouble because I can't sit still. I can't sit in my seat. A lot of times kids will ask for medication because they're just frustrated and they're being expected to fit into this nice, neat box of sitting still and learning a certain way, even though that's not the way their mindset is going to learn best, just because of the way schools are in that. I've always said that if I learned the way I do now, I would be sitting there in math and say, you know what? I'm going to go do English for a while. I'll be back. That's not going to sit too well with the teacher. That I need to do interactive learning and have discussions all the way through the class, that's probably not going to sit too well with the teacher. And you recognize how the school system may not be set up really well for positive, productive learning opportunities for kids with ADHD. Notice that 60% of the children diagnosed, they end up being ADHD as adults too. This doesn't just disappear. And most of us are under the impression that it does. I myself, it disappeared for a little while, and we'll talk about a little bit why that is too for women. For adults, 41% of adults with ADHD consider the impact from it severe. And I hear that a lot from folks. I belong to a neurodiversity group at Microsoft. They are incredibly supportive of neurodiversity at Microsoft. And our Teams channel, we meet, every morning at 9 a.m. If you can meet, come on into this channel. This is an open talk. And we have those conversations. And some of them say that it's just helpful to hear other people going through the same thing they are. We talk about options, we talk about answers, we talk about opportunities to connect, to learn from each other, to do better. That's what it's all about. What worked for you? What will work for me? Can I kind of change this? So if I work on that idea and make these, these small little shifts and these accommodations, this might work for me. How do I, get these accommodations? How do I discuss this with my boss? How did that work with yours? These really have benefits for us, and helps. And the people that I mentor, I go through a lot of these discussions of, it's not just, get on medication. No, this is how I work day in and day out to be successful. I have written numerous books. I have been able to do presentations. I work on long-term projects that a lot of people with ADHD, they think can't. And part of it sometimes is even matching me up with somebody who is able to balance out my weak points. I do that 9/10, that huge workload, knowing that they'll come in and dot those last I's for me and cross those last T's. That's the difference between success and failure at times. Worst cases of ADHD, it can reduce your life expectancy. And you'll say, what? How can this be? When you start thinking about it, this is what made me decide I needed to be medicated. I was driving down the road with my 2 oldest kids in their car seats at that time. And I'm looking at the light and they're talking, and all I can focus on is their conversation. It is like nails down a chalkboard. And I'm trying to focus on the light in front of me and going, is it green or red? Is it green or red? Is it green or red? And I'm starting to panic. I didn't have enough focus. My ADHD was so bad that I couldn't tell if the light was green or red and was coming to an intersection. That's when you start to realize this and you understand that some impulsive behaviors, not just the lack of attention, could put you in danger. And that they notice that by looking at some of these incidents, that ADHD could be very impacting to your life and your life expectancy. That it impacts careers as well as relationships. I have seen numerous individuals that have had, lost opportunities to succeed in their careers, either with opportunities to be promoted, loss of jobs, not working. And we will say this over and over again, our job is only as good as our boss. And if you have a micromanager boss, you're probably not going to do very well as an ADHDer. We do much better if we have the finish line and we're just told, go run the race. I have helped a couple people in our neurodiversity group of finding good managers even, and writing down what is it that you really do well and what do you need to be happy and work? What do you don't do well with? And writing down those lists and sticking to it, not just jumping to the next job and saying, well, so I'm not happy in my job. That's part of work. I think as ADHDers, it's even more important for us to have jobs that we really enjoy and we're good with. And then how to get better sleep and just improve your quality of life. So genetics have a high risk in this. 40% have a parent with ADHD. I have two. So yeah, it definitely runs in the family. But you can also get ADHD from brain injuries, environmental factors. Diet is not a cause. So you'll hear, oh, you eat too much sugar. It can impact your behavior, but it doesn't cause it. Know that sweeteners and artificial colors are even worse. So if you're trying to figure out where in your diet that you can cut out things that may be impacting you, or if noticing that your ADHD is worse during times of the day, look at those three things, not just sugar, but look at artificial colors and sweeteners as two things that can really impact it. There are a lot of research on this, and so it's worth looking into that research. Your symptoms may become more manageable as adults, especially as a woman. We found through research that estrogen helps with attention span, but women, when they start hitting premenopause and perimenopause, start finding that wane, and their ADHD can get much worse. That happened to me. I found that suddenly I was in my early 40s and people's voices just kind of went through me. They're talking to me and they walk away, and I'd look at my boss and go, I didn't hear one word that person just said. It sounded like blah, 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 Kellyn, blah, blah. And it was because my ADHD was resurfacing, the intention, the inattentiveness, the ability not to receive information as well as I was used to. And it had to do with premenopause. Recognizing that and getting on a medication that was able to help me with that really made a huge difference in my life. Undiagnosed parents, especially mothers, find that they are diagnosed as adults because their child is diagnosed. And they'll say, well, my symptoms are kind of similar. That is quite normal, very normal. And medication is a personal choice. It should never be up to public opinion. If you decide to medicate, not to medicate, it's all up to you, and you should not feel pressure one way or the other. So adults with ADHD, it's often, like I said, viewed as a childhood issue, and it's not true. 60% of adults have it that had it as children. You may be viewed as being childish, irresponsible, that you never grew up. And I mean, like I said, I understand that because, I act six most of the time, but it's so prevalent. And the coping mechanisms may be well developed at that point. You learned how to do much better with your ADHD as an adult, but it doesn't mean that it's gone away. And now we're going to talk about the reality. This is built up. I built these charts out using these to the Grandview research and the market data forecast on ADHD. And I'm just saying IT has an ADHD problem. Yeah, we do. We know that IT is inundated with ADHD. Most of us know that if you look around. And it's no wonder. We have a lot to keep us interested. We can move from one field to another, and nobody really knows because they all think we can just fix people's computers, relatives' computers when we come home for the weekend. Understand that. It has a lot to keep us intrigued and interested and passionate, and we're not expected to kind of fit into this little box. And so, as you notice, gaming and technology has two of the highest numbers of both suspected as well as confirmed ADHD cases. In the industries of banking and finance, as noted also, is some of the lowest. So, of course, more tedious work, I would expect if they had farming on here and that, those would be very low too. Jobs that have work that may look less interesting, less exciting, are going to be less, less inundated with ADHD. What did surprise me is the military. And the only way that I can chalk this up, and I noticed the variance in the ADHD confirmed versus suspected. I think it's suspected because military has a high percentage of people that are only high school graduates. They didn't go into college. So that may be a reason for those high numbers, but that they're not as confirmed because they may not have the access to therapists and psychiatrists to diagnose them. So that's what I'm thinking those numbers came from. And again, I don't have the data to back that up because I just created that. So I will look into it and maybe blog on it later, but it was very interesting to me. So let's talk about the biggest complaints. These are the biggest complaints that I hear about. Executive dysfunction, disorganized, being, timekeeping, lack of attention, inability to transition, procrastination, learning disorder, internal preoccupation, and miscommunication or incomplete communication. So I'm going to try to go into each one of these. So first thing, executive dysfunction. You're having trouble starting. Try not to overthink things. One of the biggest recommendations I give my children all the time, especially my middle one who has a challenge with this, come up with small goals, break things down into small bites to take them on. If you can do that, you're going to feel a lot better. And especially if you can come up with small rewards when you finish one of those and then jump back into it, because that small reward will help bring up those activity levels so that you can jump into the next task. But make sure you have that next task too. And that's why you have to-do lists. Have those lists that say, I can transition to this next thing and this next thing and this next thing, and start checking them off. And because you're checking them off, that also gives you something to feel good about. Because again, I'm checking it off. I feel good about what I'm doing, and it gives you more activity levels and feel good about what you're doing, which of course gives you endorphins, and it's a circle. It's a full, complete circle. Schedule a begin task with an open end time. So if you have something like you need to clean your room, don't say you've got 2 hours to clean this room and give it a time schedule. Say, I want you to start today on cleaning this room, and I just want you to show me that you're cleaning something every single day. I used to do this with my kids. And as long as they were making progress on it, we kept it open. I kept rewards coming, and they felt much better. We found that if you just kept punishing them for not getting through it, it got to the point for my oldest son when we were still learning this, that you would punish him and we keep taking stuff away because he wasn't cleaning it. He got to the point where he had his empty mattress in his room. It just didn't work. Positive reinforcement will work over negative punishment. It just does with ADHDers. So think about that open end time with positive reinforcement, a lot of feedback and small chunks, small goals. Disorganization, remove clutter. I've never been a clutter person. I don't like clutter, especially after raising 3 children in a small house. We have 5 children between, our consolidated household, between my husband's children and my own. There was a lot of clutter to get rid of when we moved into the RV. Got rid of 95% of my stuff. I was never so happy in my entire life. Clutter is really a lot of chaos and distraction for anybody who's ADHD. I know you may think that you're going to use that in a month or 2 months, or you really shouldn't get rid of it. Just dump it, get rid of it. We can be hoarders. It can become overwhelming. If you don't need it, get rid of it. Schedule time for designated tasks like email and that, things that you can clump together. Like I go in through this morning routine. Routines are autopilot. So if you can say, I get up in the morning and I do this, this, and this over and over and over every morning, you get those routines, you'll get those out of the way and you'll make sure that they get organized and done. Automate things. For even my email, to get through it, it can be very overwhelming. I keep a folder inside email underneath my inbox that says to do, keep in mind, done. And I go and classify them. And that to-do list all the time, whatever goes in that to-do list needs to be emptied out by the end of the day. Rest of my inbox can go either way. And I also have ones for each one of my customers to keep track of them. But that to-do list says this is the stuff that needs to be at the top of my mind and I need to address now. And that makes it much easier for me to go through my email and not lose anything in the white noise of everything else that's happening. Consider outsourcing things. I had housework done. I had somebody come in and would clean my house when I had the kids. Weekly shopping. We now have Instacart. We now have, all these different ones that can come in and do our shopping for us. And we don't have to get up, get our shoes on, get our bag, get in the car, go to the store, let somebody else do it. You'll be surprised how much time you get back. Working from home has been awesome for me for over the last, 12 years now, because I don't have that daily commute. I lost so much time in the daily commute that I could put towards a routine at home that was much more effective. Simplify your clothing choices. This sounds funny, but uncomfortable clothing, it is a distraction. Simplify your clothes, simplify your colors, keep it simple. You will find that for your life, it takes away distractions you may never have realized that you were really impacted by. And at the same time as you remove clutter, think about what you do need. And as we start talking about, like, for my computers, I have multiple computers, but all my files are in a cloud. They're in the cloud drive. I can get to those no matter which computer I have with me. I keep multiple computers because in my bag, I have my mobile computer. At my desk, I have my work computer. If I have to go real quick and work remotely, my bag is already packed. It's already ready to go. I have a second set of headphones in there. I have a second set of my medication. Everything that I need is in there. So I don't get somewhere and go, I forgot that, I forgot this. I double up on what I need. For when I travel, my suitcase has all of my makeup and my cosmetics, not my cosmetics, my shampoo, everything. I got a separate second set in there. Everything is mobile, so it cuts down on what I have to remember, and I don't have to worry about forgetting. Duplicate the things that you need. Get rid of the stuff that you don't need. Automate everything. For, anytime you can set up rules inside your email, every time you can set up auto pay for your banking, set that to auto pay. Organize everything automated when you can do it. Timeliness, this gets into this as well. The more that's automated, the less you have to remember, which keeps you more timely. The next is go to a single calendar. I don't know how many times I've been screwed up between two calendars, so I forward everything and put it all into one calendar. Pad the amount of time that you need. See if you can set up meetings so that you have 5 minutes before and after. So if you're scheduling a meeting, instead of a 1 hour meeting, set up 15-minute meetings. Give yourself some extra time, some breathing space between those, so you have prep time to get ready for your next meeting. Consider a smartwatch. I do love my Apple Watch, especially for women. We don't have the pockets usually to keep our phone on us. So to have a watch that has only essential notifications to tell me I have a meeting coming up, I have a call that's important that came in, I have emails that I really should answer. Those notifications come to my watch and they keep me on top of things. I know what's going on, and all the stuff that I don't need to know, I've got rules. They put them into folders. Ignore conversation is one of my favorite things. If you send me an email and I don't need to know about this conversation, I'm hitting ignore conversation in Outlook. Only accept necessary meetings. Filter everything out in your calendar that you don't need to know about, because it can become white noise. And if you assume that it is white noise, you're going to start ignoring it and you're going to miss things that are important. Distractions. Yeah, that snail can be too loud. I don't know about everyone else, but I have been in offices where there's been somebody clacking too hard on keys, everything else. To help with your attention, think about having numerous tasks that you can transition to automatically. You don't have to go look for something. It's already in a list. You know what you're working on for the day. You know about what time you have allocated that it will take to do this. So not only this is a task I need to do, but I think it's going to take me 2 hours to do it. I think it's going to take me 15 minutes to do it. Put those times along with it. So you know that as soon as your attention is waning from one task, go, I'm going to shift over to this other task because I'm not getting any further on this first one. Have hobbies to train. We are living in a day and age that we are training our brains to have short attention spans, not just ADHDers, but everyone. Social media, everything is all about instant gratification, instant attention, and de-attention, inattention, I should say. So do reading, do yoga, meditation, model building, word games, painting, whatever it takes. Do something that requires you to maintain attention. I do everything from yoga to plants, anything that's going to extend your attention span. Ensure proper rest and nutrition. Both of these are extremely important. As I said, artificial colors in that can really affect you. Find out if you have allergies that may be impacting your attention too. You may be surprised what can really impact you. Gluten was giving me migraines. That, of course, a headache is never going to do anybody's attention good. When your attention is waning, you're not getting those results, walk away. Keep focusing on the same thing over and over again, hoping that your attention will come back, rarely works. Taking a quick break, all of a sudden things will come back to you and your brain will start functioning again. I don't know how often I've gone on a walk and all of a sudden I'll be like, there's the answer. Take a walk, take a break, find something else to do, just find a way to get away from it a little while, and those attention levels will come back up, and you'll find that you have the answer. And limit distractions and noise. I love noise canceling headphones. I don't know about everybody else. I even have sleep buds that have noise canceling from Bose. They really make a difference. Peaceful surroundings. But know if somebody says, well, it's quiet in there, I don't know why you're saying you feel distracted. What we find distracting may not be the same, and it can be different per person. It can be a clock ticking on the wall. It can be somebody walking by that you hear under the door. It can sound like nails on a chalkboard. And I think that's the best way to describe ADHD to people who don't understand it, is that just a benign sound to other folks sound like nails down a chalkboard, and you can't think through it. You can't focus past it. Procrastination, inability to complete tasks, perform small tasks. Break it down into bite-sized pieces, make it easier for you. Interweave those with larger tasks, just kind of like what we were just saying in the last one. Do something, do anything, small goals, and then migrate onto the tasks you were hoping for. If you're having trouble getting started, procrastination is hitting you, start anything. Anything that catches your attention, you start working on it, your activity levels are up, then slowly do a bait and switch on your brain and go over to your other task. And again, reward yourself. This works with kids and for adults. We're all the same. We really are. And learning disorders. Know that we are all unique individuals, and that learning disorders can be part of this. Found out that my oldest son was quite dyslexic, and that this was impacting his ability, learning disorders, when he could transition. It would take us hours to get through one page of homework because he could not transition between 2 pages. Interleaving the questions with the actual image and putting it on one page was the win of figuring out how to get him through some of his homework. But realize what your disorder is. You can't address a problem if you don't know what it is. So take the time to figure out if it is a combination issue, to get your management support, and try to get rid of the stigma behind mental illness as well as ADHD, and saying that, if we can come up with a solution for this, accommodations for it, that this is the way to fix it. It's not to pretend that it doesn't exist. And internal preoccupation and transitioning. We talked a little bit about this. Inability to transition. I use multiple monitors. You can see me looking at my lower monitor. My upper monitor is the one that's actually running. Inability to recall words. I used to do word association, 6 degrees of separation. It's kind of the Kevin Bacon thing. I'm sitting there going, okay, his name was such and such, and he talked with that person and did this, and first name starts with a T, and you'll start working through, get somebody to try to work it through with you and talk it out. And racing thoughts. Try to slow your brain down, distract yourself with music. Books on tape work really well for this. Talk it through with someone you trust. Try to work it through, especially if you're frustrated about it, have strong emotions about it. Imagine it an optimal scenario. If your racing thoughts have to do with something that's going wrong, imagine it coming out the right way to help calm yourself and work through it. And the next is kind of the big deal. This has to do with communication, speaking. As I said, I like to interrupt. I try to count to 5. This is a good way to keep you from interrupting, because your brain has already received the information. You might be already on the way, the outtake back. There may be more information that needs to be processed. So try to count to 5. Focus on the goal of what you want to say. We can often do run-ons, sentences, go down the rabbit hole. Keep yourself on what is the goal, what is the content that I'm trying to communicate here. If we're hyper-focusing, ask the person if they can come back later. I used to call this drive pies. I would be hyper-focused and have all this data in my head. I'm close to a solution, and somebody comes and says, hey, can you help me with this problem? Be like, could you follow that up really with an email? Because I'm thinking if I let go of this, I'm going to have to drop all of this to focus on them. I couldn't transition between everything that I had because I'd focus all 25 of those drive-throughs on one task, and they want me to drop it all for whatever they're dealing with right now, and I couldn't do it. If you have hyperactivity through speech, consider taking more time enunciating. I don't get complaints in most of my sessions that I do about speaking very fast because I enunciate very clearly. I didn't understand that for a long time. It took a while to go, why don't I get dinged for that like other people do? And realized it had to do with my enunciation as well as my speaking with my hands. The Frenchman in me, I speak a lot with my hands. If you get stressed or frustrated or anger, this can cause you to react. You feel things for a reason. Remember that you do that. Think about why you feel it, first of all. Try to focus on what might be causing it, but it will also keep you from maybe blurting out, or you'll clam up. So also make sure, am I starting to think about this too deeply and I need to continue to interact? And then also, am I rambling? Am I just going on and really not saying anything? Just stop, let the other person start. Hey, does so-and-so, do you have something to add to this? And listening. That's the other part of this, because remember, 90% of our communication is not verbal. Verify if peers have to repeat a lot of stuff to you, that you didn't receive their communication as intended or you misunderstood them. This may tell you that you have a problem with how you receive content into your brain, that your activity levels are not pulling that in correctly. If so, ask people to help. Maybe follow up with an email. I really appreciated this conversation today. Could you follow up with bullet points? I really want to make sure that I understood everything that you said and you gave me such valuable feedback. Repeat what was said to you as they're saying it. As they're saying it, say it back in your head, repeat it back in your head. It will help you receive it more clearly. Ask the speaker to clarify or elaborate if you don't feel you understood it. I am very big about saying, could you elaborate on that? Or could you clarify on that? Because if I don't understand it, maybe other people in the room didn't either. So I don't think I'm doing a disservice by asking for people to elaborate more. It just means we have more information. Ask questions, of course, interactive communication we're going to do better with, as well as one-on-one conversations are going to do well. If somebody decides they want to talk to you about something important in a busy social area, a social event, probably not the best. Ask them if you can step away and talk one-on-one with them. And be aware how much pragmatic conversation you are privy to with ADHD. I am a hyper aware person. That means, like I said, I'm taking in everything. My ADHD medication feels like blockers, what do I want to say? Horses have them. I can't think of the word. 3 a.m. this morning, this next morning, it'll come to me. But it feels like I have just these blinders put on me and that I don't take in so much data and I can focus on what's going on in front of me instead of all this other stuff that's coming in. And you need to be aware that as an ADHDer, you may be one of those that's taking in everything and it makes it hard to focus on what's in front of you. And it creates an emotional toll. The emotional toll in this, it can cause, for me, I used to say this, if you cry at McDonald's commercials, you might be an ADHDer. You may get angry and you don't know why. You're like, why am I even upset about this? There's no reason for it. It can affect you. It's another form of loss of control because your activity levels are low. You can become non-reactive. It's not even receptive. You didn't feel any of it. And so you're not reacting. And hypersensitive. We were talking about hypersensitive. I am hypersensitive to colors. So you'll notice everything is very lacking color in my house. My clothing, everything. I'm very sensitive to bright colors, don't like it very much. And then open space. If you work in an open space, rearrange the desk so you're facing the wall. Use your monitors to help black out some of the open space. Use noise canceling headphones. They can be a wonder. Bose, Sony makes great ones. Even the Surface headphones have really good noise canceling ones. Ask for an opportunity to use a quiet space, either a separate room that you can take phone calls in or get times that you can schedule so you can use it to work in, and consider a do not disturb sign. Put it on there. I use do not disturb in Teams. I don't want anybody disturbing me then. And if your work environment, if you're working from home and you need structure, ask for somebody to offer you structure, set up schedules, use timers, try observed controlled outing. I found that if I went to a coffee house and changed my scenery and put on my noise canceling headphones, I could burn through a huge workload. Something about that change of scenery and having people around with my noise canceling headphones does it. And it's a controlled distraction. It works very well for me. So try different things and find out what works for you and document it. Keep a log. Know what works, what doesn't. Ask for scheduled times to work in a collaboration group if it's too much, and work away from them if you need alone time. Set aside scheduled time, like I said, for email, and schedule focus times for calendar free and meetings and interruptions. Some folks love to be around other people 24/7, but if you're an ADHDer, that can be a little too overwhelming. Make that list and don't just keep it to yourself. Share it with your boss. Tell him how he can make you successful. And work with ADHD. Multitask when you're able. I am a big multitasker. I do it constantly. Keep notes. Like I said, if you need something in multiple locations, do it. If it is clutter, get rid of it. Let your manager know. Our jobs are only as good as our managers. I have a fantastic manager right now, and I've had one for the last couple, jobs that I've had. But I did a lot of training of my managers, letting them know this is how I work best. This is what makes me happy. This doesn't make me happy. I'm very open about it, but it's about how can I make myself as productive as possible? How can I be successful? There's the finish line. This is how I run best. And use tools. Use tools wherever you can. Timers, routines, smart home devices to auto and remind you, bill pay, auto pay, grocery delivery, anything that you can do there. I still face challenges. This is my current challenge. We have TSI certifications. I can't take time off to study. One, I'm a terrible studier. Just read stuff, forget it. Time test. If anybody has taken Pearson testings, you know this. Getting into the system takes longer than taking the test. And I'm frustrated by that. Hate it. Absolutely hate it. This has been my big nightmare. And be kind to yourself. We've been in a demoralizing situation as an ADHDer, as children, as adults. Don't expect success or perfection. Expect better. Just work with yourself and find ways to be better every day. That's your goal for yourself. Compete with yourself, not with others. Make yourself comfortable. Discomfort can be very distracting. So get rid of the discomfort. Give yourself breaks. Be kind to yourself. Do self-care. I find that massages are incredibly powerful for me. If I start getting migraines, I'm stressed. I know this. Mass distractions, get rid of them. If noise canceling headphones, do that. Like I said, I use even noise canceling sleep buds for sleep time. And if you're feeling something, know that you feel it for a reason. Find out the reason why and deal with the reason, not that you're frustrated. Accept that you feel that way for a reason. And then my own tips to success, I laid in here as well. And I know we're running out of time here, so do I have like 10 minutes left?
Tracy?
Yes,
where am I at?
Oh, see, I think I'm rushing.
Go as long as you like. The last session, we're all here.
Yeah, take 2 hours if you need.
Yeah.
And I'm running fast. We're feeling good now. So my own tips to success here, own your ADHD. I'm not embarrassed by it. I tell people that I'm the ADHD spokesperson. I don't believe it is a disorder when you work with it. When it becomes a disorder often is when you're being micromanaged. I am one of those, you show me where the finish line is, I'm going to run that race. But I want to be able to figure out how I'm going to run that race the best. If I have a micromanager that comes in and says, so what made you decide to wear that running shirt? Why did you tie your laces that way? Why did you decide to lead with your left foot instead of your right? I'm going to be crippled. I am very aware, hyper aware of everything that they're thinking. And I want to make my boss happy, but I don't even know what that is anymore. You need to just tell me, this is what I need. These are the accomplishments I need to judge this by. Go run the race. You're the professional. That's the kind of boss I can work for. And I found that out pretty clearly. Somebody who's going to micromanage me, somebody who doesn't tell you what they actually need is going to frustrate me quickly. So I have found out what works for my ADHD and what doesn't, and have utilized that effectively. That when I start, let's say I'm writing a book and I'm writing on a chapter and I'm not interested in what I'm writing on, I'm going to walk away from that chapter often and work on other tasks. I'm going to interweave that chapter into those tasks so that I know I only have so much time. I can get a lot done, but I've only got 5 minutes to write it. And then those activity levels are going to go down and I'm not going to get anywhere again. And I'll do that constantly. And I'll constantly make progress, but no one will realize that I've had to do it a little bit differently than maybe somebody else will. I will make constant cliff notes. I will write out outlines and live by those outlines, but because I use those outlines to quickly catch up to speed again when I come back to that task, to say, I wrote 5 minutes, got it out, I leave, and then I come back and go, next outline step, write 5 minutes, leave. I'm looking for those opportunities that I can get through something as efficiently and effectively as possible. Like I said, I automate everything. I even automate my yearly annual review. I write things down as they come in and I've got it and I can copy and paste in everything. I script anything that I do more than twice. Human intervention is leaving me for human error because I am not as detail oriented as other people, that if I have tasks written down in a spreadsheet, I'm missing 50% of my left visual field because I had strokes in my 20s. And if I'm trying to check those off, especially if the check mark's on the left side, I can miss one. So if I script it, all I do is execute the script and it does it all. I'm going to script it every time. I know where my vulnerabilities are and I'm not going to play, Russian roulette with them. It's not a good idea. I take my medication because I need to. I may not like, I take Strattera, which isn't a controlled substance like some of the Adderalls and that, but it still doesn't make you always feel that good. Your stomach may be upset. So on Mondays, I know that, and I give myself breaks on Mondays. I'm good to myself, get massages when I want. And my boss is really good. We have these open discussions where I can say to him, I have ADHD and this is how I work best. And I really hated this happened today. And, I thought I was doing really good and I screwed up. And he can help me. He may have ideas of how I can be more effective. And I think that's incredibly important when you're telling people that, because if they learn more about ADHD, they're going to less likely have those stigmas and know that we are incredibly capable. It can be a superpower because I can get an incredible amount of workload done. I am more risk-taking. That impulse control that we talked about, that might be considered a disorder problem for some people. I do things that people say, well, afterwards I might go back and go, what made me think I could take that on? I have had I should be fearful now. I think my boss may be watching this. I've had my previous bosses fired 2 to 3 different times. What made me think I could take that on? It wasn't an effective boss for me. So I went to HR one time and told them, I believe it's a conflict of interest for the production DBAs to report to a development manager, and move my entire group to the operations manager. That was lack of impulse control. Anybody else would have said, no, I shouldn't do that. Me, I went and did it. And that's where you start to realize that there's always a positive to something that somebody else may think is a negative. And you have to find the positive in it and make the most of it. And that's one of the things that I did. I had another boss that was continually creating situations that was taking down production and everything else. And I created a solution that collected that information. I went to HR and presented it to them, and they ended up firing her. And we ended up with a very good database administration group for years after that. But if I didn't have that impulsive nature to say, I know this needs to be done, I'm just going to go do it, and be kind of fearless, I know that comes with my ADHD. That I take on workloads that anybody else would probably go, oh, screw that, I'm not going to do it. That's part of what makes me me. And I think that's true for anyone that has ADHD, that we have incredible energy levels, that we can be incredibly positive and impulsive and capable, and folks don't realize it. That anytime you talk about something, especially in the IT industry, what is guaranteed? What is it about IT where people say, oh, that's going to work 100% of the time? We do have to be somewhat risk takers. And they've said there's some research, and I couldn't find this research, I looked for it, where they said that the reason that there is a higher percentage of ADHD diagnosed in the US is because it was what took, the kind of mindset it took to discover the New World. It wasn't the farmers, it wasn't the laborers inside the factories that came to the US. No, those weren't the people that were interested in something exciting and new and different. It was the ADHD mindsets. Because ADHD is hereditary, it was natural that they ended up discovering the New World, and that there was it just was logical that we would have a higher percentage here. So that's something to think about too. And if I ever find those numbers, I'm going to post them again because it was a great article. So if you aren't part of an ADHD group, there are tons of them. This is just from Meetup. This is the map from Meetup, all the different ADHD groups that are out there. So if you don't belong to one and you were thinking about how could I become part of one, there's a ton of them out there. And there's tons of resources for this too. And know that October is the ADHD Awareness Month. I always let people know that. You will see me posting like crazy during that month because I figure, I'm the spokesperson. And I've got tons of references here on content groups that you can become part of. Chad has tons of groups that you can become part of all around the world. And that includes for those that are parents of ADHD kids. It's a unique challenge to be a mother. I know I have 3 children that have different ADHD. I only have 1 in college left. Thank you, Lord. Thank you. But it's always a challenge because our education system is not made for ADHD kids. And to get them through and get them successful is a hurdle that most of us don't know. And if you do, I feel for you. Like I said, if you're in this session, you probably are trying to figure out about ADHD and, deal with this stuff. I will tell you that, these children are brilliant. All of mine are considered gifted in high IQ. And I laughed, Sam, my oldest, came back one year, his 9th grade year. He had the highest IQ in the school registered, and he had the lowest GPA at the same time. This is what we deal with. So you recognize those challenges, and that working through learning is, even my TSI requirements. Right now, I'm just taking the dummy tests over and over again. That's the way I'm learning right now. So I can actually get through my TSI requirements. But if you put me in front of the product, I can do it flawlessly. And this is the world we live in. So with that, hopefully this was helpful. Tracy, are there any questions?
Well, you've got several comments that they learned a lot and it was awesome. One person said, thank you for saying that. I've been debating the need to do something about this for madness for 5 months now. One person was asking about they like to wear nice clothes because it makes them feel good, but they know it's absolutely a distraction. Is there any way to organize and simplify it without it getting to them?
Yes. When you're trying on clothes, try on clothes and walk around. I do every position you possibly can in the dressing room. Find brands that are comfortable. I won't lie to you. I am a free people person. I should take stock out in their stuff. But there are companies, and if you get your name to me, I can even send them to you, because there are companies that make clothing that's comfortable for women that still is like business clothing, and even pumps. They say I can't do it. I'm a Doc Martens woman, and I only wear Allbirds tennis shoes. But I will say straight out that they say that women, they did a study on this, and that women adjusted their clothes 4 times as often as men. And you think about how often we're doing that, how distracting that must be. I just got to a certain point in my life where I just said, no more discomfort. I will be comfortable at all times, and got rid of everything. And I'm just going to say this right here. I own no underwires. I own nothing constricting in any way. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. But there are companies that make very comfortable clothing for business wear as well, because I've done the research on it, hoping for it. I know one of my cohorts on the Oracle side that's in the Oak Table, Gwen Shapira. swears by some of this clothing, and she has to wear it for Cloudera. So if you get me your information, I'll definitely share the links to the stuff for you. But I believe in it. Wear what you feel. I think comfort has to be both of what you feel comfortable in and you look comfortable in. So I would be uncomfortable in a polo. A polo just isn't me. I wouldn't feel like me in it. Hopefully that answered that.
I think so. The person knows you, so they know how to contact you.
Okay, cool.
Might CBD or even THC help with any parts of ADHD?
It does. My oldest son will definitely tell you, he lives in Colorado, so, pot is legal there, and he will tell you it helps him with his anxiety. It really takes the edge off his anxiety, and it made a difference there. I am very partial to CBD. I've never tried pot, so I have to be honest. I'm very naive about it, but CBD takes the edge off my pain from my arthritis. And for me, that can be very distracting. Pain is distracting, plain and simple. So if you have any kind of body pains in that will help, of course, too. Frustration, pain, all of that is very distracting.
Someone had a good, funny question for you, so I saved this one for last.
Okay.
I always wondered if you were into the punk alternative scene in your teens and 20s.
No. Honest to God truth, I was a kid that did everything my parents said, and I stayed at home. I was stood up for my prom. I was so nerdy, and no, I didn't go through any of this. I know that, you see the tattoos and everything else. All this is my adulthood. I was this brainy kid. I just did everything my parents said, and then my 20s were my dark times. So for those who don't know it, I had started having strokes. They're pretty sure I started having them when I was younger, but the first diagnosed stroke was when I was 22. I had them until I was 26. I had to start over then from scratch. I had to relearn how to drive. I lost 9 years of memories. My 20s were pretty much a blank slate. So this is why I still act like I'm 6. So I remember my teenage years up to about 15, 16. That's when it starts getting kind of foggy. But I do know that I just did everything my parents said. And mostly I know that because my youngest sister, my dad referred to as Kellyn Unchained. And she tried my parents to the end. They saved all the rebel behavior into that youngest child. And I'm the oldest. There you go.
Right.
Hopefully that answered that one.
I don't see anything else unless someone wants to pop something else in there.
Yeah, I think I should see them, but I don't see anything in the chat. I see open one, but nothing. Oh, now I see the CBD one just came through.
Yeah, that's not. I pulled some of these out of the chat as well, so I combined them. So
medication is such an interesting conversation because you'll hear people that say, "Oh, only Adderall works for me. Only Vyvanse works for me. Only Strattera." I've only been on Strattera because I am a previous stroke victim. They tried to put me in. I don't even remember what it was. It could have just even been Ritalin. They put me on a medication for 3 days. And the third day I'm in this meeting, it was with that dev manager I fired too, by the way. I'm sitting in this meeting and I'm supposed to be talking and the world is coming in. I already am missing 50% of my visual field, but the rest of the world is just coming in. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to pass out. Just smile. Just keep smiling, act like you're fine. I thought I was going to pass out and slip right underneath the table. And I got off the phone and I called my doctor and she's like, your insurance puts you on what? They had changed my prescription without talking to her. And she called them up and said, this woman has had strokes. Do you want her to die and be responsible for it? Think about how much money you will lose in the suit. And they put me back on Strattera and I never had another discussion ever again. But I'm not allowed to be on those medications. Strattera is the only one that I'm allowed to be on. So there you go. But yeah, CBD, I look at CBD and THC as medications. You know, I'm one of those that even though I've never tried pot, I think pot is a lot less dangerous than alcohol. That's just me. It's my personal, and I live in Oregon. We laugh when we go back to Colorado because right when you get to the Oregon-Idaho border, there's like little pot drive-throughs there, and the lines go they're miles long. It's pretty funny. So that's the world we live in today. So
Yep.
there any other questions?
Nope, no other questions.
No, everybody's like, it's Friday. I'm going for the weekend. It's Friday, guys. Woo!
Thank you. It was awesome. Most awesome.
Thank
Yes, it
you.
was.
Yeah, you guys got me on Friday. Of all the ADHD times, I only take my medication from Monday through Friday. And the reason that Strattera, you'll hear, works for a couple of years for most people and stops. For me, the reason that it works is because I only take it Monday through Friday and I give the weekend off. I let my brain wander. And so Friday afternoon, we've kind of started to wear it down. So I am not as focused as I would be, let's say, Wednesday at noon.
I don't think any of us are.
I don't think we noticed that you weren't focused, so
Yeah.
you did a good job.
Yes.
Thank you. I just noticed I shift in my chair more and I'm distracted by everything out there.
You kept right on talking and giving your talk though, so there's nothing wrong
Oh,
with
I can
that.
always keep one of those McDonald's drive-throughs going. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
good.
see?
Yeah, that's all that matters.